Okay, we're continuing our interview with Sister Bonnie Smith on the history of Old Mount Carmel. It's July 12, 2010. We're in Salem, South Carolina. And Sister Bonnie is going to tell us about the amphitheater and the expectation of the solemn assembly. Okay, Sister Bonnie.
I have a picture of the amphitheater that Brother Houteff had made, and there was two hills, small hills, come together, and so he made a valley between them, and also it was, terraced, small terrace that you could sit, and then the platform was quite a ways down, so it was quite impressive to see. But this picture you can't, they haven't made the seats yet. It was just being cleared, and that's my brother clearing, the wood off of it, my little brother. Okay, I wanted to tell you where the TG said about the solemn assembly. And Brother Houteff, made this solemn assembly as an example of what Jeremiah did when he bought some land from his relative, nephew, or somebody, and people thought he was crazy because he was telling people that they have to go to Babylon, and here he was buying some property, and he wanted to let them know that it would be so many years that they would be there, and the Lord would bring them back. And they didn't have that faith. They said he was buying some property. He says one thing and is doing another. And we don't question a prophet, but we do believe what the Bible says. So this TG it's a great and dreadful day of the Lord, and it was given on September 27, 1947, and in the first part, the first call, or first trumpet, I would say, was it's announcing this Davidian message because of Joel 2, 1-3, and here you see that a message is to be proclaimed to the church. That's the first call to Zion. It's mentioned here. And to be proclaimed to the church, to Zion, declaring that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is at hand. That is to be, it is to be devastation behind, and is behind his people, and a glorious ahead of them. And our hope of the kingdom, of course, is the glorious ahead. That the Lord is thoroughly to comb his field, that he is to gather every grain of wheat, and then burn the tares. So we know that by studying the message. The second trumpet now, and about the beginning of the message and everything on the first trumpet, now you got the second trumpet. Verse 15 and 16, blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children, and those that suck the breast. Let the bridegroom go forth of the chamber, and the bride out of her closet. In these verses, as in Joel 2:1, the command given to blow the trumpet in Zion, this second trumpet, that's on page 22, however, is not to announce the day of God, but to sanctify both a fast and the people, to call a solemn assembly, from which not one is to be exclaimed from the assembly. And then the 17th verse you can read, but I'm going to comment on the on the explanation of the 17th. Here we plainly are told that God's people are to face persecution and distress, not to be delivered to the kingdom, but to face persecution. What does that mean? That our Jacob's trouble is beginning. And that unless they keep close to the Lord, their very existence may be at stake. God's name dishonored, and the heathen allowed to rule over them and to challenge their faith in God. Because we'll have to face a world coming together and being against God's people. And we're going to have Jacob's trouble before the great time of trouble when Satan gets after the loud cry people. Okay, so then what happens? We have the information of the second trumpet here, but it's not time yet. And the Lord is giving us an announcement. After Brother Houteff had this sermon, and it got the people's attention at that time, then he had begin to make this amphitheater, and our big bulldozer, which you saw that, I think, did all this work in just a short time. And Brother Houteff kept close watch on this, to see that it was made like he wanted it. And so then, after he made this, and it was all finished in 51, I guess, or 52, he was already had a stroke, and he was crippled, and he came out to the amphitheater one Sabbath afternoon. I happened to be sitting on the stile that divides B8 property from Goat Hill, and I saw him come over there, and that this amphitheater always got my attention too. I couldn't understand why it was made, but I never questioned it. I was just interested. Anyway, I went over to Brother Houteff. He was standing there looking into that amphitheater, and I said, Brother Houteff, who's going to, how many people can be sitting in here? He says thousands of people, 10,000 more. Anyway, I said, well, when would this be that all these people come here? He says, we're not ready. Now, when you consider that you have to have a lot of buildings for thousands of people, and we didn't, and people thought he was, this was just some of his ideas because of this TG. They didn't know that or realize that this was an omen of what would take place when the time come, and this second trumpet don't tell you where it's going to be either, and so we have to have faith that this part of the Bible is true, and these comments on these verses is going to take place, and when we went down to Waco in 2003, after my husband died, I took care of him for 2 years before, and my son said, Mother, I'm going to take you to Waco. I think you'd like to go there. And I said, oh, I sure would. So he took me there, and my granddaughter came with us, and so he says, oh, where's that amphitheater? And I says, I got to go by B8 because it wasn't too far from B8. And B8, by the way, is still standing there. But it's the only landmark of the old, part of old Mount Carmel. And that's the only way you can position it. If you've lived there, you can go by the trees. You can go by the lay of the land and how close it was to B8. So anyway, I said to this man that had a house right on the edge of it, and it's nothing but a ravine now with a lot of bush in it and trees, and because that's many years ago that this was made, and when we sold the old Mount Carmel, they had to bulldoze the dam out. They bulldozed a lot of the land for the tracts of land, houses that was going to be put in there. So when I came to this house, and it was right by and this was now 2003, I came to this house and I knocked on the door and I said, "May I take a picture of your backyard?" And he says, "This backyard is nothing but a ravine." I said, "But I grew up here in this land. I was a Davidian Seventh-day Adventist, and I still am. And I wanted to take the picture of the old amphitheater used to be in back of your yard." And he's, "Oh, lady, I want to talk to you so bad." I've known all this history now. He wasn't an Adventist even, but all Waco knows the old Mount Carmel and what took place, and they have all this record there in Baylor. And he said, "I want to talk to you, but I have to go to a doctor right now." And I said, "Well, we just come here for a few minutes, and I'm going to go to what we called the brink that overlooked Lake Waco when I was a girl, and then we're going to be gone because we have to get to Enid, Oklahoma tonight." And he says, "You do? Oh my, I would like to talk to you." So it shows that the world, they know this, what happened back there. But he says, "This Koresh thing, it don't sound like what you folks knew." And he says, "I wanted to meet an old Davidian, not a new Davidian." And he says, "You have quite a few people right up here on the hill." And I said, "No, we don't belong to those people." But he says, "Those people don't act like you folks way back there at this time." And that's why he was glad to meet an old Davidian, because the new Davidians there in Waco is not doing right, and they don't believe right, according to the message. So anyway, this was a person that was just from the world, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to remember that this old amphitheater was in my backyard, but it don't look like an amphitheater today." I said, "No, I'm sure it was bulldozed off." And that's the reason why I say that this amphitheater was just an example of what the type would be for Jeremiah to purchase this land 70 years before the children of Israel came back. And it was even before they went there, because Jeremiah finally was killed because he told all this. And you read the Bible and you know all this type. And so this amphitheater was just an antitype of what one of these days, when we have this second trumpet, because we have the first trumpet now, and we have to know what this first trumpet has so we can believe that when this second trumpet happens, that we'll be obedient and be getting together. I don't know where.
What's the reference again?
Okay, it's 2TG8. The first trumpet would be on 21, and first trumpet would be on 19. Here we see that the comment on Joel 2, 1-3, okay. And then you have all this on the first trumpet. Now the second trumpet is 21, 22, okay. and further. Anyway, this is the timing of the. Okay, now I want to comment here on one of the students that came. Was the second DLI students that came there just before Brother Houteff died, and you'll find this on Volume 10, Number 2, December 1954, History on October 26, 1953 to October 24, 1954.
Symbolic code.
That was our history day there. And all the things, this was the last October 25th that we ever had, because Brother Houteff made sure that we had it. We never had another one because they wouldn't have it. Anyway, this was one of the students that came there, and I don't want to name his, gave up the message, but he was a sincere student there, and he said, I am greatly impressed by the things I have seen and heard about the building up of Mount Carmel. Remember that they were all people brand new from the church, and especially from the church, and they come there to go to the DLI class, and it was just before Brother Houteff died. He gave the address to these people, these new students, DLI students, and on November 26, 1954. So you know by that what timing it was. And this is one of the students from California. He said that I am greatly impressed by the things I have seen and heard about the building up of Mount Carmel in the early days, and the progressive selling off of land tracts as its purpose is fulfilled. So you know that old Mount Carmel was closing up. Brother Houteff had the building of Mount Carmel. The timing was for one purpose, and that was to get this message to the church. When Brother Houteff finished, that's when the city fathers of Waco started letting people come in, and that's when they started, expanding Mount Carmel. The land in Waco, and they said in July of 54, they said that we have to we're making Waco larger, and Mount Carmel's property is going to be included in the city limits, and Brother Houteff says we have to sell off now. This was important because we'd been there all these years. We didn't have any place to go, and so it was on faith and something that startled everybody in that meeting in July, and so then it started changing people's idea of where they would go, and because Mount Carmel was closing up, because Brother Houteff was finished with the literature. It says, my interest was further aroused. You can read this at your leisure, but I'm just reading this part so you'd know that this was Brother Houteff's idea, not anybody else's. My interest was further aroused by the several sightly buildings, and they were from Bulgaria, I've told you, that kind of building. Also by the huge amphitheater, which seats thousands of people, and which can be made ready for use in a few days. This is what Brother Houteff said, when he built it. It wouldn't take long. So it wouldn't, we was wondering how 10,000 people would ever be able to get on Mount Carmel, or how but the Lord didn't show him all what was in the future. He just showed him that this solemn assembly is going to happen someday, and this amphitheater was only we call it
type.
The word,
Type.
An antitype of or a faith situation that would be with this TG, that we were going to have something, but God didn't show him where it was going to take place or anything, because he just knew that we had to sell off old Mount Carmel. So he says we have to move out of the city limits. So we didn't know, why he built this amphitheater, only because of that TG. And you can see that TG is Ezekiel 9 time, because it's the great and dreadful day of the Lord. That's what 2TG8 is, and it means.
that solemn assembly leads up to.
Yes, it does. So we know that it's going to be a place where maybe not all of the earth will be in that place, but each country, each area, the men, women, and children have to be there. All the, everything, even the little babies, all have to be together because we're going to face persecution. And that word persecution means that our Jacob trouble is going to start then. Because this here is just a few little incidents where we've got enough examples and enough in this message to tell us that Ezekiel 9 is going to be during a gigantic war, and even the Pentagon told Byron, our son, when he graduated from officers candidate school there in Columbia, and a 2-star general came down there from the Pentagon. He says, and Byron went to Newberry Park Academy, and he must have got a Jesuit priest or something, because he told those boys in that class in the 12th grade that the Bible wasn't authentic. It was a good book, but it wasn't authentic. And our son announced that to us one Friday night when we went to get him and bring him back to Riverside. And we were devastated that we sent him to Newberry Park. But we didn't know where to send him at that time because he didn't want to be studying at home. And 17-year-old boy, you have to show him the way before then. And sometimes we would be given studies maybe to other people and not paying attention to our own son as much. We felt bad that, he wasn't grounded in the Davidian message. But he said, when this general told the class that we're going to have a gigantic war in Palestine area. Now, this is the way he said it. But we don't know when. It's the when we don't know. But it will take place, he said. And Byron says, oh my, to himself, of course, my mother and daddy's been telling me this all my life. And here, a Pentagon man told us that it was going to happen. Wow. And so see how the Lord has put off all this Cold War, hot war, Cold War, since World War II. He's been putting it off for our sake till the 144,000 are sealed. Then wait and see. What we have to do now is make use of every minute so that we'll be ready when our freedom is taken away.
When the 4 winds let loose.
Pardon?
When the 4 winds let loose.
Oh, yes. When the 4 winds let loose. Oh, that means the Sunday law is right there.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Sister Bonnie on this really interesting topic of the building of the amphitheater and its connection with the Solemn Assembly. This is certainly a topic that Sister Bonnie was very excited to talk about, loved to talk about it, making reference to, of course, the sermon address in 2TG number 8. What's interesting is after the death of Brother Houteff, there's arisen various uninspired ideas about the Solemn Assembly. For example, when I studied with Salem, Donna Dare would teach or taught that the Solemn Assembly would take place in the future, and it would be all the 144,000 be gathered out in the woods in the National Forest next to the Salem headquarters. And at the time, I didn't know any better. Bashan also teaches that the Solemn Assembly will be in the future, and all the 144,000 will be gathered out there in Exeter, Missouri at their headquarters. Well, we've done a video recently where we've exposed that both of these ideas are false. And you can check a link in the description box below for that presentation where we actually look at the references of what the Rod says about this Solemn Assembly in Joel chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, and how pretty much everybody's got it wrong. But what's interesting is Sister Bonnie's vivid recall of how Brother Houteff felt that it was a possibility that it could take place back in his day. And he built the amphitheater in that expectation. So this is some interesting perspective of the history. We're hoping to get an interview with another person that lived at Old Mount Carmel and also recalls the building of this amphitheater. So we hope you enjoyed that. We encourage you to subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon for notification, because we have many more of these little interview nuggets with Sister Bonnie talking about some of the life and the situations there at Old Mount Carmel Center in Waco, Texas. So we thank you for joining us. May God bless you until we meet again. Godspeed.